There's a sentence that forms like a fist in the chest. I'll never forgive my parents. If you're a chosen one, someone life drafted to break the pattern, to stop the ancestral loop mid-spin, you've probably felt that heat. Not because you love drama, but because something in you refuses the old contract. Carl Jung would say a complex has been constellated: mother, father, family, fate. The moment you start to wake up, those figures step out of the photo album and into your nervous system. You don't remember your childhood, you relive its pattern in real time. And a part of you vows, never again. But here's the paradox Jung points to. Premature forgiveness is often just a prettier mask for fear. We call it letting go, but really it's spiritual people-pleasing, a way to stay acceptable to the tribe while avoiding the howl beneath. Jung warned about this. Anything we refuse to face in consciousness descends into the shadow and rules us from below. When you forgive too fast, you don't dissolve the bond, you tighten it. You keep reenacting the same story with partners, bosses, mentors, even strangers on the internet. Different actors, same stage directions. So why shouldn't chosen ones forgive, at least not at first? Because your task isn't to tidy the past, it's to see it clearly enough that the spell breaks. Forgiveness as performance keeps the spell alive. Individuation, the path Jung devoted his life to, is not about being nice, it's about becoming whole. Whole means the child who wasn't seen finally gets seen, the rage that protected you finally gets heard, the grief that has been holding its breath finally exhales. Whole does not mean neat. Family lives inside us as imagos, inner figures built from memory, myth, and unmet needs. You don't argue with your mother, you argue with your mother imago. You're not defying your father, you're wrestling the father pattern that colonized your will. When a chosen one says, "I'll never forgive," that vow can be sacred for a while. It's the psyche throwing a boundary around a newly discovered fire so the wind doesn't blow it out. The point is not to stay angry forever. The point is to stay honest long enough that anger can ripen into truth. Jung noticed that destiny repeats what we don't integrate. The child of chaos seeks chaos to feel at home. The child of silence marries silence and calls it peace. If you slap "I forgive you" over this machinery, you'll swear you're free while your life keeps voting for the old regime. The deeper move is stranger and braver, to deliberately stop rescuing your parents' image, stop explaining them, stop minimizing your memory so others won't feel awkward, to name what happened without needing anyone to co-sign, to let your story be loud inside you until it becomes music. This isn't about making your parents villains, it's about taking yourself out of a role. Chosen ones don't seek revenge, they retrieve sovereignty. They don't cancel their family. They end the spell by becoming someone who can see it. Only then does forgiveness, if it ever arrives, feel less like a moral achievement and more like weather. It comes when the climate inside has changed. Here's what Jung would tell the chosen ones. Forgiveness is not a commandment. It's a consequence. It's not a virtue you perform. It's a byproduct of understanding. Once the inner child stops trying to fix the parent, the system loosens on its own. You don't have to forgive your parents. You have to see them, see the wound that raised them, the unconscious patterns that spoke through them, the fear that made them rigid, the shame that made them cruel. That seeing is the true forgiveness, because it stops the inheritance of blindness. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Before you can see your parents clearly, you must allow yourself to see yourself as the wounded child. And that's what most people avoid. The ego prefers to be enlightened than to admit it was once powerless. Jung called this inflation, when the spiritual self tries to skip the human part. Chosen ones often fall into that trap. They awaken, glimpse cosmic unity, and then feel ashamed for still being angry at mom or dad. They think, I should be above this by now. But the psyche doesn't care about should. The soul heals on its own timeline, not by spiritual bypassing, but by embodiment. Every chosen one reaches a point where they realize their anger toward their parents was never really about them. It was about the soul demanding wholeness. Your parents were the carriers of a pattern older than their names. They passed on what they didn't transform. And now life chose you to stop recycling it. That's why Jung called the individual who dares to confront the family shadow the redeemer of the lineage. You redeem it not by fixing anyone, but by refusing to keep pretending. And that's where true compassion begins. Not the soft, sentimental kind, but the fierce compassion of awareness. When you stop expecting your parents to become what they could not, you end the inner war. The forgiveness you once tried to force now happens without your consent. It's not an act, it's an unfolding. You simply realize one day that the grudge has turned into gratitude, not because what they did was right, but because what it did to you woke something deeper. Forgiveness, in Jungian terms, is alchemical. Lead turning into gold, pain turning into consciousness, the child's cry becoming the adult's wisdom. You don't forgive your parents for them. You forgive because your own soul outgrows the need to keep bleeding. So if you're still in that space of, I'll never forgive, honor it. Don't rush it. That vow might be your soul's way of saying, no more lies. Stay there until the truth matures into something real. Then, one day, you'll see that forgiving or not forgiving no longer matters, because you're finally free from the whole drama. If this message resonated with you, take a breath and let it sink in. Because it's not about forgiving too soon, it's about finally being honest with what still hurts. Tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you wish your parents had told you, but never did? You might be surprised how many people will read your words and whisper, me too. And if you're drawn to these kinds of deeper, soul-level reflections, subscribe to Fractal Wisdom, where we explore the psychology of awakening, healing, and what it truly means to be free.